Hey Scott, welcome to
Yes,
In the
Yes,
sir.
Game.
sir.
Welcome to In the Game podcast. I'm Cody Thomas. I got my special guest Scott Strode of BlueChips Nation Hoops. Scott, I'm excited. We had a great talk. Was it Tuesday night? Was it
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tuesday night? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Tuesday night. And I just thought that what we talked about would be great to share with the people that may not know this knowledge or information that we were sharing. And but before we get started, share with me and the guest about what Blue Chips Nation is and how you got started.
So
so
almost by
almost by
accident,
accident,
but
but
back in
back in
2022,
2022,
my
my
oldest
oldest
son
son
was
was
in his
in his
senior
senior
year of
year of
high
high
school.
school.
It
It
was
was
January.
January.
I can
I can
remember it.
remember it,
Um,
um,
pretty
pretty
clearly. It
clearly.
was
It was
January of
January of
his
his
senior
senior
year,
year,
um,
um,
and
and
he
he
was
was
uh, he was a
he was a
return. He
return.
was a
He was a
senior. He'd
senior.
been
He'd
an
been
all
an all
stater,
stater,
all
all
conference,
conference,
all
all
everything
everything
when
when
he
he
was
was
a
a
junior,
junior,
and
and
was
was
finishing his
finishing his
senior
senior
year
year
and
and
having
having
a
a
great
great
year,
year,
of
of
course.
course.
And
And
so
so
it
it
kind of
kind of
come
come
about,
about.
what was
What
his
was his
future going
future
to
going to
hold,
hold,
and
and
would
would
basketball
basketball
be
be
a
a part
part
of
of
it?
it? And
And
so
so
I
I
started
started
doing
doing
some
some
exploring
exploring
around and
around and
seeing
seeing
if
if
I
I
could
could
find
find
any
any
resource
resource
that
that
kind of
kind of
told
told
us
us
where
where
he
he
stood
stood
against
against
some of the
some of
other
the other
players in the
players in the
state.
state.
And
And
there was
there was
a
a
great
great
deal
deal
of
of
top
top
players that
players
he
that
had
he had
played
played
against,
against,
whether
whether
it
it
be
be
in
in
AAU
AAU
or
or
just in
just in
regular
regular
school
school
season.
season.
But
But
really
exactly
exactly
where
where
he's
he's
at
at
in
in
the
States.
States.
I
I
looked
looked
around
around
for
for
a
a
bit.
bit.
I
I
found
found
a
a
couple
couple
of
of
about
about
the
the
rankings
rankings
that
that
they
they
had,
had, not
not in
in
regards
regards
to
to
him,
him,
just
just
total,
total
because
because
going to
going to
state
state
year,
edging
edging
out
out basketball
basketball
in
in
the
the
state,
state,
and
and
had
had
been
been
going
going
to
to
AAU
AAU
tournaments
tournaments
and
and
his
his
regular
regular
season
season
games.
games.
I
I
got
got
to
to
see
see
a
a
great
great
deal
deal
of
of
most
most
of
of
the
the
state's
state's
best
best
players.
players.
Just
Just
in
in
doing
doing
those
those
things.
things.
So
So
I
I
took
took
it
it
upon
upon
myself.
myself.
I
I
thought
thought
just
just
kind
kind
of
of
hobby
hobby
and
and
public
public
site
site
with
with
ID
basketball
basketball
players
players of
of
the
the
top
top
80
80
of
of
2022
2022
class
class
players,
players,
and
and
I
I
published
published
the
the
website
website
and
and
then
then
did a
did a
corresponding
corresponding
Twitter
Twitter
page,
page,
which
which
is
is
still
still
the
the
page
page
that
that
we
we
see
see
now.
now.
And
And
back
back
to
to
you,
but
anyway,
I
I
had
had
that
that published,
published,
and
and
weeks
weeks
later,
later,
Coach
Coach
Bethany
Bethany
called
called
work
work
on
on
a
a
night
night
shift,
shift,
and
and
we
we
talked,
what
what
he
he
wanted.
wanted,
Seen
seen
my
my
list,
list,
and
and he
he
went
went
down
down
through
through
the
the
list
list
and
and
talked
talked
to
to
me
me
some
some
about
about
some kids I thought he might be interested in.
and
I give him some advice on
what
what
schools
schools
to go to,
what
what
games
games
to
to
go
go
to,
to,
what
what
tournaments
tournaments
might
might
be
be
coming
coming
up
up
that
that
spring.
spring.
Anyway,
Anyway,
and then a couple weeks later, it happened again. I had a call from an assistant coach from one of the MEC schools here, the Division II schools, and same thing. Young coach, unfamiliar with West Virginia, and just wanted a resource of note where to recruit from. And so again, we had a good talk, made a connection. Um, and that just kept happening and kept happening and kept happening. And, I finally realized, well, that's just what this is going to turn into being. And then fast forward, my son had graduated, and we get to the winter of, and it had really cooled off to start the 2023 season. And, and it wasn't no big deal. It was kind of fun helping those guys out the year before. I never really thought much of it, but I did keep up with the website, and I re-ranked, and I put the 2023 rankings up for 2023 players. And it was like a flip of the switch, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. It was January 15 of 2023, and I started getting DMs, emails, text messages from college coaches. And I've told this story, and I know people find this hard to believe, but I had a message. I had contact with a college coach for 6 straight months, every day of the week, every month of the year, from January to July. And I was more than happy to do it, but it got to the point where it was so busy. It was fun, and it was really interesting. Don't get me wrong, and I really enjoyed that. But it was to the point where I had to either drop it or I had to find a way to monetize it. So, and really just not monetize that recruiting part of it, but just monetize my knowledge of players in West Virginia. So that led me to a connection with the prephoops.com folks that August of 2023. And, so I maintained, and they encouraged me to keep the BlueChips part of my business intact while I did because that was what helped me gain the knowledge, to be able to do the prephoops.com stuff. So anyway, September 2023, I officially started writing, and it became the lead and only scout and writer for Prep Hoops Boys, prephoops.com for West Virginia boys. And I'm still that guy today. So, in turn, that kind of led down the path of, what is the blue chip side going to be? And I pivoted that part of it several different times, to now where it's really multifaceted. I have a small list of clients that I've maintained for referrals, recruiting, consulting, and I mean player clients, players and their parents, with not so much. I do, but I don't really do a lot of quote unquote exposure. To just make sure those players get in the right spots as far as camps, if they need help with AAU, as far as finding a team, so those types of things. And when there's coaches that are looking for guys to key in on, those are my priority. And so I help them, anything from social media to, and of course they get, first priority for any of my events. So those guys will be well served for that. So exposure, I do, of course, do plenty of stuff. Do all the retweets and stuff for them on Twitter, on Facebook. Reposting things, and as well as things on Instagram. But and then so pivoted into. I still do that, so that we actually added a post-grad program. We've got wheels in motion for that, kind of a pilot program, if you will. That's another business that'll officially, it's rolled out. We're extending on, but that'll officially happen this fall. Coach Ronnie Newsom, who most folks might know from the West Virginia Reign AAU program, he will be he'll be the coach of that. Ronnie and I have collaborated on several different things, basketball related, outside of the AAU. But he's collaborated with me on he coaches we have a fall league prospect team that we put in the Anderson Court Fall League in Morgantown, West Virginia. So we gather prospects from around the state, put in the fall league, and they play play 8 games in 4 days there. College coaches, I've finally got college coaches trained to come in and watch those guys. That's one of the little things we do that I collaborate with on. And then he helps, and direct the events that we have slated as well. So that's just a couple examples of things that we collaborate on. But he will be the post-grad coach for the BlueChips post-grad program, which in short is a commuter-style post-grad program. If folks are familiar with Flight 22 out of North Carolina, probably the most post-grad program as far as a commuter-style program. And actually, those folks at Flight 22 have got to know Ronnie really well the last couple of years on the big shot circuit, and him like this anyway. So it was natural. He and I partnered up on that. And so anyway, it'll be a commuter-style program. We'll take we'll take the team. Well, he'll take the team and play most of the games we played against JV developmental type squads, players at places like Bethany, Wheeling University, Potomac State, U Pike. You all are familiar with. We'll be at U Pike probably twice. And play against a couple NAIA schools down there. So we'll get on campus with those kids and play against real college players and get evaluated by college coaches in their own gym. And I don't think there's any better way to get a player evaluated and a player an actual look as far as and get good feedback and as well as good film that we can send out. So. There's no better way to do that than through this post-grad type program. So, there's always several kids that, need that extra outlet and that extra step, to get pushed up to another level. So we're going to give that a try. That's one of the things. Like I said, it's a pilot program. So we're going to give it a try, see if the market is there for it. It is, dollars and cents wise, we are way, way, way below the price point of anybody else. But we feel like we'll have, one of the most effective programs, in this part of the country, just because of the natural connections, that I have with these college programs. So,
and that's what it's all about, your service, what I do, and we'll talk into recruiting, but our job is to put kids in school, right, Scott? It's great to be on X and Instagram, which it's no secret. X and Instagram recruiting, your social media, that X is number one, Instagram is number two. The way I look at it is X is where the coaches are, the older coaches. Instagram's where the other kids and the younger coaches are. So that's your first two avenues, right? You want to get your film seen, your highlights, and I have some tips on that too. But running pure prospects, I started in 2015 and got successful through the years and had a couple events, great events, and we'll talk about what we think events are really for and what a complete and successful event consists of. But over on to the recruiting side, we were talking about it the other night, and you just said it a while ago. You were so busy, and I just want to reiterate the fact. Like I've tweeted out a few times, like, "Hey, it's not possible. It's not possible for me to answer all these DMs. You probably can't either. So if we can't, these college coaches are not going to be able to do that." So we were talking about the strategy of tagging these coaches, tagging people like you and me, just to get it repetitive.
Yeah.
And then, we're talking about like the other avenues. You don't have to just be professional on the court, but sending and receiving emails. And I want you to talk about the importance of that and your story about, the kid you were telling me the other night about, the first round, the second round, and the importance of like posting You can't post on
Yeah.
X too much. It's not possible. Promote yourself. And with the
Right.
emails, tell us, your tips, what works for you and your system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So,
I'm
I'm
kind
kind
of
of
mapping out a
mapping out a
blueprint,
blueprint,
as we
as we
speak,
speak,
with
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 this
this
first
first
set
set
of
of
clients.
clients.
And I've
And
got
I've
an
got an
idea in my
idea in
head
my
what I
head what
want
I
to
want to
do.
do.
And
And
a
a
lot of
lot of
this
this
is,
is,
kind of
kind of
preliminary
preliminary
type of
type of
thing,
thing,
um,
um,
that I'm
that I'm
working
working
on.
on.
And
And
email is
email is
a
a
huge
huge
part of
part
it.
of it.
And
And
why it
why it
is
is
a
a
couple
couple
different
different
things.
things.
It's
It's
still the
still the
most
most
effective way
effective
to
way
get
to get
information
information
to
to
somebody that
somebody
you
that
need
you
to
need
get
to
it
get it
to,
to,
whether
whether
it
it
be
be
a
a
coach
coach
or
or
whatever.
whatever.
Yeah, the
Um,
most direct route. Yes.
Right,
right.
right.
And I
And I
think it's
think
the
it's the
most
most
professional,
professional,
um,
um,
and it
and it
allows you
allows
to
you to
kind of
kind of
show
show
that
that
professionalism,
professionalism,
if you
if you
will,
will,
that
that
business like
business-like
approach.
approach.
In an
In an
email
email
it's
it's
much
much
easier to
easier
do
to do
that.
that.
You
You
can
can
put
put
you can
you can
put a
put a
lot
lot
more
more
information in
information
an
in an
email, and I
email, and
don't
I
just
don't just
mean
mean
like
like
a
a
long
long
email
email
with
with
10,000
10,000
words in
words
it,
in
but
it, but
you
you
can
can
attach
attach
you can
you can
attach
attach
pictures, you
pictures,
can
you can
attach
attach
a
a
huddle
huddle
link, you
link,
can
you can
attach
attach
YouTube
YouTube
links, you
links,
can
you can
attach
attach
film, you
film,
can
you can
attach
attach
highlight.
highlight.
Any of
Any
those
of those
things you
things
want
you
to
want to
do,
do, you can
attach
attach
your
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 X
X
link.
link.
All those
All those
things you can
things you
do
can
that
do
in
that
that
in that
one
one
email.
email.
And wrap it all in
And
one,
And what
what
right?
that
that
does,
yeah,
yeah,
and
and
everything
everything
that
that
coach
coach
might
might
want
want
from
from
you,
you,
he's going
he's
to
going to
get in
get
one
in one
shot.
shot.
He's going to
He's going to
get
get
your
your
huddle
huddle
link where
link
he
where
can
he
go
can go
look at you.
look
And
at you.
that's
And
the
that's the
first thing
first
he's
thing
going
he's
to
going to
do
do
is
is
he's
he's
going
going
to
to
go
go
look
look
at
at
your
your
huddle
huddle
and
and
probably
probably
look at
look
your
at your
highlights real
highlights real
quick
quick
and see
and
if
see
he's
if he's
interested.
interested.
If there's
If there's
something there
something
that
there that
catches his
catches his
eye,
eye,
he'll
he'll
keep
keep
on
on
watching.
watching.
And then
And
he'll
then he'll
break down
break down
some,
some,
maybe
maybe
watch a little
watch a
bit of
little bit of
game
game
film.
film.
And
And
from
from
there,
there,
it's
it's
just
just
going
going
to
to
be
be
an
an
evaluation,
evaluation,
on their
on their
part if
part
they
if
want
they
to
want to
keep
keep
on
on
going.
going.
But
But
back to
back to
the
the
story.
story,
We talked when we
when we
talked
talked
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I had a
I had a
young
young
man,
man,
a
a
client
client
in
in
California.
California.
He's
He's
ranked
ranked
number
number
30th.
30th.
He's
He's
ranked
ranked
30th in
30th in
California.
California.
Um,
Um,
right
right
now, a
now, a
low
low
level
level
Division One
Division One
prospect,
prospect, and I
and I
and I
thought he
thought he
was
was
all
all
along,
along,
from the
from the
outset when I
outset when I
saw his
saw his
first set
first
of
set of
film that he
film that he
sent to
sent
me.
to me.
So
So
I
I
took
took
him
him
on
on
as
as
a
a
client,
client,
and
and
this
this
kid
kid
is
is
a
a
high
high
player.
player. Short
90
90
pounds,
pounds,
some
some
muscle.
muscle.
You
You
can
can
tell
tell
he's
he's
worked
worked
his
his
tail
tail
off in
off
the
in the
gym.
gym.
Super
Super
athletic,
athletic,
jumps
jumps
out
out
of
of
the
the
gym,
gym,
just
just
does
does
everything
everything
well.
well.
Handles
Handles
the
the
ball
ball
well,
well,
shoots
shoots
it
it
well.
well.
I
I
mean,
mean,
he's
he's
just
just
super
super
duper
duper
solid.
solid.
He
He
looks
looks
like
like
he's
he's
ready
ready
for
for
college
college
right
right
now.
now. And
First
first
lessons
lessons
first,
first,
look
look
the
the
part.
part.
For
Any
kids
kids
out
out
there
there
listening,
listening,
number
number
one,
one,
the
the
part.
part.
Look the
Look the
part.
part.
You
Keep
keep.
coach.
We
We
start
start
down
down
the
the
process,
process,
and
and
I
I
tell
tell
him,
him,
this is
this
a
is a
two way
two-way
street.
street.
This
This
isn't
isn't
just
just
me
me
doing
doing
100% of
100%
the
of the
work.
work.
You're going to we're
We're
going
going
to
to
go
go
through
through
this
this
together,
together,
and
and
here's
here's
what
what
we're
we're
going
going
to
to
do.
do.
So
So
I
I
send him
send him
my
my
coach's
coach's
directory.
directory.
I've
I've
got a
got a
coach's
coach's
directory
directory
of
of
about
about
1,800
1,800
coaches.
coaches.
And
And
so I
so I
sent
sent
to
to
him,
him,
and
and
I
I
said,
said,
you
you
pick
pick
100
100
schools
schools
or
or
120
120
maybe.
maybe.
And
And
I
I
said,
said,
the
the
schools
schools
that
that
you
you
want to
want to
go
go
to. Of
to. Of
course,
course,
he's
he's
in
in
California.
California.
There's
There's
a
a
trillion
trillion
schools
schools
in
in
California.
California.
So I
So I
said,
said,
pick the
pick the
best
best
ones,
ones,
not
not
just,
just,
don't
don't
pick,
pick,
just
just
UCLA
UCLA
and
and
UC
UC
Berkeley
Berkeley
and,
and,
USC.
USC.
I
I
said,
said,
pick
pick
the
the
tons
tons
of
of
Division
Division
One
One
schools
schools
there
there
too.
too. Mid
Mid-level,
level, mid
mid-major,
major,
whatever. I
whatever. I
said,
said,
pick
pick
the
the
schools
schools
that
that
you
you
like
like
academically
academically
best
best
because
because
you're
you're
a
a
high
high
academic
academic
kid
kid And if all else fails, you're going to get an academic scholarship probably. So I said, pick the schools that, maybe offer what degree that you're after. Be very conscious of that part of it. So he did. And, I think he had 30 or 40 Division I schools in California. And he hit several Ivy League, if not all the Ivy League schools. Anyway, so he sent his first set of emails. I think it was 120 emails he sent out. And the first thing I did with him was I helped him shape that email. He really worked on it on his own. He sent it to me to proofread and and really make sure it sounded good. It was constructed well. He had tags for his highlights on there. He had a couple of game film below. He had all the right links on there for all his stuff. I mean, he had everything. It was so well done. We corrected a couple of things, and he had it so well worded. Went through and proofread it for him, and it was very professional. We did that. And that was our first little project together. We did that, and but he sent that out himself to all 120 schools. Well, a couple of weeks go by, and he told me, he said, I haven't heard anything. Do you think I'm going to hear anything? And I said,
these kids get so anxious, don't they?
Right, for sure. And understandably for him, because I think he understands what level he probably belongs on. And we had talked about it. I was real serious with him where I thought he belonged. And it wasn't to kind of blow his head up and say, hey, you're great, you're this, you're that, so I can keep him as a client. It was me being real with him. This is where I think you belong, because he was in the middle of his junior year, and he looks like a high level player to me. So we go through the process, and I told him, I said, here's what we're going to do. I already had it in my head how we're going to plan this out. I said, 2 weeks from now, I said, you can start getting this ready whenever you want. I said, 2 weeks from now, a month out from that first email, we're going to send another one. And it's going to be an update on your season. We'll be close to the end of the season. You're going to let them know where you guys play and when you play in the playoffs. You're going to let them know who you're going to play for, and he plays for a very high level 3 SSB AAU team. And I said, let them know who you're playing for, give them the schedule, and give them an update. So he did, and almost immediately. And this is just how it works. Almost immediately, he gets feedback from, and it was an Ivy League school, and I don't want to say which one it was, but almost immediately he gets an email back, a response back. So that told me two things. Number one, our plan worked. Number two, that at least that one coach, but probably several, had kept that email from the first time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have responded so quick. So that coach had some name recognition with that, with Mason, the player, and he knew right away that he wanted to connect with him. And so we didn't hammer him with emails, 3 a week for a month, but we had a kind of a schedule set, and we're very strategic in what we wanted to send. And like I said, so I told him, then I was like, he responded because he read your email for the first time. Otherwise, he's not going to just respond to just a random email from somebody, especially you're in California. He's an Ivy League.
And he's probably one of the coaches, and the other coaches that seen the email, they probably wrote his name down and didn't have the time right then to check that email because they're probably during the season recruiting or get it to one of his GAs, assistants.
Right.
So, I mean, there's no time limit. I was talking about some of these kids get anxious, I have anything, heard anything. And you were talking about was professionally written. I always say it's quality over quantity. Just because you keep ripping emails to them, and it doesn't have all your information, and it's not correct, you're wasting their time and your time as well.
Right.
So your strategy is great, and being professional not only on the court, but right there, because like I told you, these coaches they're investing in you not only on the floor but in the classroom and to work as well. Because if you don't do either one of those, you're wasting a roster spot, and you could lose him his jobs or her job or whoever's coaching. So it's a great strategy you had. So finish your story about that coach got back with him. So what was the process after that?
So from there, so we've got all the AAU stuff out. So what he's doing right now, what he'll start doing right now is reaching out to coaches and telling them, each week, hey, I'm going to be here playing. So if he's got replies back, which I'm sure he does, if he's got replies back from, let's say, 6 coaches, he's going to let them know, hey, I'm going to be playing here. So if it's an Ivy League, obviously he's going to let them know, hey, we'll be at a live event in South Carolina in July. Or if he's got, any schools in California, he's going to let them know, hey, we're playing at the live event in LA, which they are. We're going to play an live event in LA. Here's the, are you going to be there, or can you be there? Here's where you can come see me. So I just think it's, I just think it's just good to, keep that contact. And you don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to, like I said, you don't want to send them 3 emails a week, but keep it professional. And eventually, you're gonna, once you've got that little bit of interest there, you've got that little bit of interaction, then they're watching. They've got you on their watch list. They have some interest. The interest is mutual. So, and then you just build on that. You just build that momentum. You just build that list. And then those are the guys that you go to. You exchange phone numbers. Maybe you start texting. Maybe those types of things. So it's work. And what I told him was, and he was so great about it. And this is the thing we hit when I told you this story Tuesday was, here's a kid who has absolutely everything. He's on a high level. He's on a high level 3 SSB team. SSB team. He is, and he looks like a college player already. Body wise, he's there. He has all the physical and basketball attributes you could ask for. He can do everything. I'm sure there's some things that he probably needs to work on, like any 16, 17-year-old kid that does in high school. But I think he's ahead of schedule in a lot of ways. Athletically, body-wise, he's ahead of schedule. Those types of things. But anyway, it would be so easy for him to just sit back and say, "Somebody will find me," because I play for this shoe circuit team. I'm ranked 30th. I'm average. I averaged 20 and 10. During the season, I did this. He was, all region or all area, whatever.
Yeah, like
I said, he had lots.
Like I said, I think the kids in the recruiting world and the basketball world don't understand the magnitude or the number of other kids going for that spot. And you talk about this kid. I mean, as we both know, Division I is a different beast. But even if we're talking about any level, I don't care what size you are, what you can do. There's a thousand other kids out there that are putting in the work, showing their professionalism, putting their grades in, and like I said, they're looking for kids to invest in their programs. So, like you said, it's a two-way. It's a two-way street. You don't only put the work in the gym, but you have to you got to promote yourself. You got to work with the correct people as well that will guide you in the correct direction. That's a huge piece to recruiting.
He was so great about we have I like to have a phone conversation. If I don't know the kid, don't know them very well, I like to have a phone conversation and kind of give them those expectations of, hey, this is what you're paying for. And I got to be the cheapest recruiting service in the world, probably. But that's I get him on the phone just like I did with him, and I kind of set the expectation, and we had a conversation about this is your business. And it's. I told him, I said, it's not an option to operate this way. It's the only way you can operate. And I told him, I said, you're running a business, and part of running your business right now is going to school and maintaining that 4.5 GPA. Part of your business is going to practice. Part of your business is producing on the floor. Being a good teammate, doing all those things within your high school program. And I said, but part of your business is playing AAU, being on that high level team, performing at a high level against high level opponents. But I said, you also, anybody that owns a business has a duty to take care of administrative type of things, business type of things, and some desk time. And I said, you need to set aside an hour, or maybe an hour in the morning, hour at night, or maybe just an hour a day, whatever, depending on what you got time for. But I said, you have to set time aside to do those emails, to get those tweets out, to post things, and do it regularly, not just have them post 7 different, because I had a good week of school games. Well, I'm going to post the shit out of everything. I was like, you need to have a schedule, be consistent on how you post, what you post.
Pretty much like any business, before you get started, you need a plan. What's your goal? What is your goal, and how you're going to get to that goal? Right. I mean, that's what I implement in every successful business that I know. They just literally don't just, okay, I'm going to do this right now and do this later, and let's see what we're going to get. Because ultimately, if that plan doesn't work, you're going to have to develop another one. I mean, if you're going to be successful in any business, you're going to have to test the waters. And then if you fail, you can't quit. So yeah, like you said, all of that, like you said, so you can play on the floor, you can train grades, but also, like you said, you're running a full business here. You got to do the administrative part. So you got to know what you got to do there. So that it's just more than playing basketball is pretty much what you're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, and that's just what it's become. And that is that great? Is that a good part and a good thing? Not really. But it's just the reality of it. It's like coaches dealing with the transfer portal. Do they love it? Absolutely not. But it's just part of the business right now. And recruiting is so wild. And now it's and for a kid like him, that's trying to come from high school, straight into a lower level to mid-major, D1 program, it's even tougher. That window has so small for those guys, so he has to seriously consider, a high level JUCO or a post-grad program, and he'll be overwhelmed with offers from those, by the time he gets through the middle of the senior year. But so that's something he has to consider as well. But if he doesn't take care of that business side of it right now, he'll never know if that opportunity right out of high school is there. There are still some schools that are offering, that are bringing in a couple high school kids a year, and rightfully so. And so that opportunity isn't completely dead. But you're definitely not going to get many chances if you're not acting professional.
Let's talk about
and taking care of that side of you.
So you talked about the recruiting for a high school kid and how hard it was. The recruiting landscape has changed. Like I said, I started in 2015. Today we have the transfer portal, and if you don't know, transfer portal hits. Coaches can literally get on there. Hey, I need this, this, and this. And there's a full list of kids. So, and another dynamic to that would be is, okay, college coaches are figuring out, because who they recruit, they have to win to keep their program. So you can see a kid that's 22, 23, more physically and mentally developed than a high school kid. And you can see what they've done in a certain program, what kind of offense they've ran, what kind of system, defensive system. But ultimately, we're talking about playing college basketball is a full-time job. You get up at 5 in the morning, workout, class, workout, game, then homework. So,
right.
And with that dynamic, like, coaches can see what they've done in that program academically and ultimately stay on the roster spot. And instead of taking a chance on a high school kid that could develop into what his program needs, they can literally go down a list full of kids that can see what they pretty much research and say, hey, this is what this kid's already producing. It's a less of a
Right.
risk. So that has to make sense to people in the recruiting world, doesn't it, Scott?
Yeah,
absolutely. It's I have a handful of Division One coaches that I talk to from time to time. One in particular, and he just kind of keeps me up to speed on kind of the temperature of the room when it comes to Division One recruiting. And he told me 2 years ago that they had not 2 years ago, but last year, this time last year, they had no interest in any kids straight out of high school. If they were going to consider anybody, it was going to be, they had to at least have, a post-grad year or, a year or two in junior college before they would even consider them, because it was just so, when they bring a kid in, they want to bring a kid in that's ready to play, that's absolutely physically ready to play. And I think that's where our high school kids are understanding the importance of the physical part of it, and that trickles down into Division II as well. Right now you have the MEC schools, the top MEC schools in West Virginia. They're recruiting kids that are dropping out of teams, that are transferring out of teams from the MAC, the MAC, Division One, one best mid-major conferences in the country. That's where it's at. I mean, that's what you have to compete with. They're recruiting these guys that are leaving MAC schools, to go to Fairmont and West Liberty and even the Concords or Glenvilles of the world. So it's just that tough. And I know some kids and some parents understand that part of it, but I'm telling you, I'm having a hard time convincing a lot of people that that's
the same. I have the same exact problem. But there is hope for these high school kids. For a few years, I noticed that prep school basketball, you start your program, was on a decline. But with the new transfer portal, what I'm seeing is these high school kids use prep school and JUCO to keep developing. So don't give up on your game.
Yeah.
Just figure out what the game is going to do with this transfer portal and utilize what's in front of the tools in front of you. If you're building a shed, whatever you're doing, utilize the tools that you have, because if your dream is going straight to D2, D1, and you're not getting anything, there are options. It's not maybe the option that you want, but if this is what you want to do, JUCO and prep school is a great way to keep developing and your program. So when the transfer portal comes or whatever happens in your career, you have proof that, hey, I can produce at this level, or I'm developing into a better player on the court or wherever. So, there is hope for these kids in this and these parents, because they will get upset and they don't understand what's going on. And to be honest with you, with the transfer portal, it blows my mind. I don't know about you, but yeah, like convincing these people that, hey, that opportunity is probably not going to be there now with this, the new portal, but there are options.
Right.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a great example. I don't know if we talked about this or not Tuesday, but I had a client I was working with located in Ohio, and it was a kid that he had a Bowling Green offer as a sophomore. This kid's a 6'7", shooter off the wing, which I've heard 1,000 times from coaches. I mean, I'd like to have a big wing that can shoot it, and but
still most division, no division ones. I mean, even Youngstown State, they weren't interested in this kid unless he went to prep school. And they were very, they loved his game, but physically he just wasn't there. He wasn't ready to be on their campus. And this kid, he'd been offered as a sophomore. What had happened was right after, when that season ended, that they offered. And you can look back and see their coach got, I don't know if he got fired, but he left Bowling Green. So that offer went down, went by the wayside. And this kid was left with basically, with nothing left. We worked together and had him some looks at a couple really good JUCOs. And, one of them was a top 10 JUCO in the nation, Division II JUCO, and as well as a top 25 NAIA school, and one of the top prep programs in the United States also had helped him get opportunity with all of those. And he finally settled on the local JUCO that's close to where he lives. And just because, and his parents, his dad and I talked about it, and and I told him, I said, he has the size, he has the ability, he has the skill. It's just a physical thing. He just needs to keep playing basketball and get in their weight room and get serious about adding some bulk and adding some just raw strength, and he'll be fine. All you got, then you just got to send that film out to the to where it belongs, and he's going to get, he's going to be probably in that lower level Division I, somewhere. So, then he will have a chance to get to, a Youngstown State or maybe, High University or, Toledo, somewhere like that. But they understood, they understood the value of that. They understood where, because they listened, and I didn't tell them it wasn't knowledge of mine. I'm just giving them feedback from Division I coaches. I'm giving them feedback, and they listen. It's just as simple as that. So they, like I said, they settled on that JUCO that was close to home, and that's where he's going to go. So, the notion that some of the guys, I don't know where this comes from, that they're just a little too good to go to JUCO. I had a kid tell me that a couple months ago, and he said, a kid out of the blue that asked me for help, and I told him, I said, you need to go JUCO. You're 6'7", 180 pounds. And he said, well, I just feel like I'm a little bit too good for JUCO. I was like, well, then there's nothing I can do for you, because that's where you need to go. I can't even get you a Division II offer because you're 80 pounds.
The game's more physical. Yeah, playing a high level of basketball, you got to be able to take the bumps. A 6'7", 180 kid is going to get moved out the way. I know he's skilled and whatever, but yeah, it's a physical game.
Right. The bottom line is you're not gonna stay healthy. If you're at that size, that weight, you're not gonna make it through the season healthy. And that's just the reality of it. That's the part that's lost, and it's alarming to me how many high school programs are out there, and this is in every state. I've seen it in every state. Like how many high school programs out there, and some of them are very high level. That it's obvious they don't have a weight program.
No,
and I just word it. I just don't understand why. And I get it. It's not their job, maybe to, put these kids in, in a college program, but health-wise and just to help their own program. My goodness. But anyway, a little off track there. But yeah, that's a real thing, and that kids got to be, they got to come to terms with. And I've heard every excuse.
Though, right? Parents have to be. They're their role
models. Absolutely.
Yes, they're making decisions for them just as much as the coaches are.
Right. And part of that's going to come out of their pocket.
Yes.
and the days of here. I mean, here's where it's at right now. Post grad's going to cost you money.
Whether it's with go ahead.
JUCO is going to cost you money unless you're at one of the top Division I JUCOs. Division II JUCO, the only difference between Division I and Division II JUCO is room and board.
Yep.
Division I JUCO pay for it. Division IIs can't.
Nope.
That's the only difference. They both the top 25 programs in each division put kids in Division I. The top 25 programs in each division put kids in Division II. There's very little difference, but that financial part of it. So most parents, if they send a kid to JUCO, which typically is a little cheaper, but it still costs money. Division III, it's going to cost you money.
Yes,
there is
parents, they get a college scholarship offer, D3, whatever JUCO or any offer. A lot of these schools,
right.
And, I had a parent back in like 2016, and I think I told you this story. He got an offer, a school in Kentucky. His parents were super happy, and I was like, it's going to depend on your financial and academic situation. And they didn't really understand. They didn't really understand it, so they took the visit to school, sat down, did the paperwork, and I got a call. It's like, he's not going to get any money for a college basketball scholarship. And, of course, like I told you, I tried to relay that fact, hey, these schools base your need or what they can do on your financial and academic situation. Division I's a little different, but just because you get a college basketball offer doesn't mean you're getting a full ride. And I think a lot of people think that. I may be wrong, but I see that a lot. Like kids it's great to get a college offer. That's amazing in its own fact just to be able to get to that level. But the parents or whoever the support system is has to fully understand that, hey, we're still going to probably have to fork out some money. So it's not going to be like, hey, basketball is going to get him fully through college without zero money.
Right. It's just the reality of it. Division II, of course, they can give athletic scholarships, but again, we're going back to if they have 10 scholarships or 12, whatever it is, they can scholarship their roster. Then
transfer portal.
They're going to guys from the MAC or the guys from Horizon League or wherever, or transfers from other Division IIs. Those are hard to come by. Most of the not all, but the majority of West Virginia kids that are on Division II schools in West Virginia, and I'm willing to bet Kentucky's probably the same. The majority of those kids are on developmental rosters, and they're paying part, if not all, of their tuition.
The JV teams that a lot of people don't even know that there's JV teams to these schools.
Right. So it's a mad dash for and you have like in West Virginia, you have some of the Division II schools. Their tuition is from $44,000. And then you have some that's around 8. So it's a mad dash to try to get in that public school that's about $8,000 a year tuition. To get in that program to walk on and the developmental side, as opposed to the the one that's 44, and you hope you get academic money there, maybe for 25,000, but you're still left. You're still left with a pretty sizable bill. So, it's just so much more competitive. And parents, when their kids start talking about playing college basketball, they have to understand there's a cost involved. There is definitely going to be a cost involved, and I understand trying to get the least amount of cost involved as possible, but. Just the notion that there's going to be a basketball scholarship, unless they're a high level Division II player or Division I player that
that's
and
even
even
then,
then, 80% of those kids
have to go
JUCO or prep to get to that level. So there's a cost involved with that, with that bridge year, that gap year. And like for us, it's between $8,000 and $10,000 just for us. There's the other, most prep schools are $20,000 to $30,000. Other than Fork Union, is less than that, but and JUCOs are, I think they're all around probably around 10 grand a year. Now there's some, financial aid and different things that, associated with that, making scholarship part of that too. But still, you're going to be left with some expenses. There's just the notion that, your kid goes to play basketball and you're just going to be left with, just buying his Chick-fil-A. That's just not reality.
That's not reality.
But I think that's a lot of perspectives, throughout, and it's not their fault. But that's just part of it that parents really need to understand. They need to know that going in. That needs to be an expectation that there's going to be an exchange of money with whatever school, that kid plays at. Now, let me spin off of that and let folks know. I had a client recently, a kid that was in the same class as my oldest son in the class of 2022. He went to JUCO, out in, I believe, in the Chicago area. He reached out to me after his season was over this year. He reached out to me and asked for help. And they paid to have my service for a few months. And he and his mom, and so we talked one evening on, I want to say on Monday evening. I got up Tuesday morning and I started at 8 a.m. and by 8:30 a.m. or by 9:30 a.m. he had his first offer. All I had to do was DM his Twitter handle and say, "Hey, JUCO kid with 2 years left." Well, the light bulb comes on automatically from every coach that I sent that to, and they're like, everybody wants a kid with 2 years experience in their program. Division II, Division III, NAIA, whatever. Everybody wanted his details. And actually, one of the schools that he had hit up himself before contacting me ended up offering him, giving him best offer. But just, that's just to show you how easily, when you have that JUCO experience, and there were several schools ready to hand him the moon to come there and play, because they saw the value in his experience, in the classroom, in the gym, in the weight room. They understood that part of it. They understood that he was going to be a more mature player, more mature kid on campus, and that's what they want. So that's the power of having that JUCO year or 2 years. That's just how quickly. And don't get me wrong, I have these were schools that I have really, really close relationships with, that trust, most things that I throw their way. But it was so crazy that, it literally took an hour, for that first coach to DM me back and said, "Hey, I'm going to reach out and offer him right now." And it took him, a half hour later, he had the offer was there. So 90 minutes, I'd been out of bed for 90 minutes and had this kid an offer. And it had nothing to do with me, other than I just knew the right people to contact,
And that's the biggest part, is having somebody with connections. Your network, like I tell the kids, recruiting and basketball, build your network. The bigger your network is, the better your success. You're going to be successful, maybe not only in basketball, but the rest of your life. The more people you know that you build solid connections with, you have a better chance of being successful. And but you also want to be led by the correct people. Like you said, you knew the people to hit, and that means everything. I mean, anybody could literally retweet stuff and all day long, but at the end of the day, if you're not connecting with coaches, then you're wasting your time and the kids' time, right? I mean, you might get a few out of 100 maybe, but at the end of the day, I mean, the kids are still, target the schools you like, the schools that you want to major in. What do you want to do the rest of your life after basketball? Because the reality is, what, 1% of all basketball players are going to play professionally, maybe? So, that's just a stepping stone to the rest of your life. But you have to be you have to be guided. And if you don't have those 2 years of experience and you're a high school kid, I talked to this international kid from New Zealand Monday, and he's like, "What's the first steps I need to do?" And I said, "Here's my advice to him. I first asked him his measurements. He gave me his height and his weight. I said, "Do you know your vertical and wingspan?" He's like, "Nope." And I was like, "That's crucial, just as crucial as your height and weight." But I was like, "Have you been evaluated? You need to be evaluated by multiple people, and those people have to have success with their evaluations, putting in your correct level. And then when you can do that, you know what level to target." Because I've had some kids like, I'm looking for a school D1 through D3, and I'm like, hold up, that's a broad range of schools there. So the first step, my advice is to get some solid evaluations and go from there. Is that similar to what you tell your kids to begin out with? So you can target the correct level. You got to be effective and efficient.
I think you hit on something there, and it's where where the coaches that I work with, it's where they see the value in me. I don't evaluate per se. I do, but I don't. I don't evaluate to the tune of, I know this is the style of play that this coach likes, and this kid fits that style because his skill set is this and that. I don't do it to that. But I'm pretty good pretty solid at seeing a kid and knowing what level he belongs at, where he can, where he can play. Now, does that mean that's the level? His, is that his ceiling? Not always, but it's a matter of what level can they play at. And I think that's where I've built the trust with a lot of these coaches is, so when I send them something, number one, I'm not just, it's not a constant avalanche of just DMs of this kid, that kid, this kid, that, it's, when I send them something, it's something that they can use. And typically it's somebody that is on their level, whether it's a JUCO or Division II or Division III or whatever. But I use those guys too. I have a certain, small group of guys, one at each level that I constantly check my eye with, but I'll send. And I'll let them evaluate and let them say, hey, this kid does this well, doesn't do that, he could play for us, he couldn't play for us, yada, yada, yada. And they know that's what I'm doing, and I like to do that from time to time just to keep, kind of stay sharp. And sometimes there's a kid, there was a, I can't remember who it was now. I had a coach send me a DM, actually send me a DM and say, hey, what do you know about this guy? And I said, well, I love him. I love the way he plays. But I was honest with him. I said, I don't know where he belongs. It's just sometimes I just don't get a good read on somebody. But I have the resources that I can find out. So and anybody that tells you that they're batting 1,000 on placing kids, they're lying. You know what I mean? So even the guys, even the most experienced coaches miss on guys. I can tell you guys in the MEC conference right now that some guys really missed on big time.
But I was talking about the network. We were talking about this Tuesday night.
Yeah.
But these coaches, if that kid doesn't fit their system or their level, these coaches have networks too. They know each other, and like I told you Tuesday night, coaches move as well. They might not be at the same level, but if they like that kid, they're going to write their name down. They're going to try to track them. So it's not
Right.
necessarily you bat 1,000 with your evaluations, but if you can get it into that
Right.
network of guys, that's a huge deal right there.
Absolutely. And that brings me to another point. I think that's the value of going on campus to elite camps and getting evaluated. You know, I'm not saying that players shouldn't go to WVU or Marshall camp, but most players in Kentucky or West Virginia, they're better served to get to, one of the good NAIA schools,
Yes.
or maybe Eastern Kentucky or Morehead State, or where it's a little bit more, the coaches can kind of drill down on these guys a little bit more as far as evaluations go. And if they can find a school, I know Youngstown State does this. They have their elite camps, and when they have their elite camps, there's 75 to 80 coaches there from all different, that they invite. They actually invite them to come there division because they know there's maybe 2 kids in that whole camp that they can offer or even have any interest in. But they use it to recruit, and then they allow their buddies in their network to come in and recruit as well, which is and that's why the players and parents in West Virginia have heard me recommend that camp 100 times because just because of that, because I know it's just a true recruiting event. So not to go off on a tangent, but Bethany is one of the schools that it's a Division III school here in West Virginia. They recruit from their elite camps. Absolutely, they offer guys almost every time they have one. They invite the guys they want. They bring them in to see them. I have a client right now who was offered after his freshman year because he was at a Bethany camp.
Do you know?
And
Coach,
he just absolutely blew him away.
do you know Coach Shaw?
Go ahead.
Do you know Coach Shaw from Bethany? Brian, Coach Shaw, yeah. I talked with him.
I don't think
Brian Shaw, he's an assistant.
I know who you're talking. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. He's not who I deal with.
Okay.
He's just not. Danny Zuchak is who I deal with. And they signed Jaden Stewart here. A Kentucky kid.
Yeah.
I can't tell you enough how awesome those guys are up there. They're just about an hour and a half north of where I live here, and Danny was one of the as soon as he got there, somehow or another he heard about what I did, and he reached out to me, and I've done everything I could to help him since then, because he was serious. I knew he was sincere about recruiting West Virginia kids, and he has been. He's maintained that. He's held true to that he wanted to recruit in state, and it's paying off. It's paying off for him. Well, in his travels of looking for West Virginia kids, that led him to Jaden Stewart in Kentucky. And I can remember him telling me he was going to Logan to watch him or Williamson, to watch him play, and I just. I thought that was pretty awesome. That he went to that length to recruit. He's been great about staying connected with me, and we're now kind of trying to make sure our events coincide, but our events jive together date wise, and make sure all his camp dates are good, and that we can, and I do a lot of work for free, for those schools like that to make sure they get enough people there, and they get good guys there to recruit at their elite camps. So, that's and their success is going to come because they've, they've recognized there's talent here in West Virginia, and they've recognized that, it will pay off if they just stay the course. And Jaden Stewart's going to make a tremendous impact there. I'm really excited to see him play there. And I'm going to try to go up to a game and next year and see them play with him. And that's going to be a lot of fun. He's going to make a huge impact in that conference, and that's pretty exciting. So, Washington Jefferson College, which is a Division III, they added a couple West Virginia kids. Worked with them some to get those two up there, and they've had huge success. I think they both ended up starting by the end of their freshman year. Waynesburg, another D3, right up across the border in PA. They've recruited. They just had Ethan Blackburn from Cabell Midland. They're in outside of Huntington. He just committed to Waynesburg. So they've added some West Virginia kids. And those are all schools that, I had contact with when they first really, and again, young guys, mid-20s, guys that were young and just hungry and wanted to work their tail off to find good talent. And, they really learned really quickly, like, where to look for talent in West Virginia. And it's starting to pay off for them. It's just that simple. That's how I began this whole, journey, was just helping those schools like that out. And, it's snowballed into, where we're at right now. So I'm actually now working with, that's turned into, now my business is kind of pivoted again, where I'm working with a couple schools as far as like marketing and branding and just info and data organization and distribution, trying to help them organize events, organize camps, organize and gather data and market themselves better, because they don't have enough staff, they don't have enough people to do that for them.
People don't understand, like, the assistant coaches at this level, they have a full-time job. So most of them do. Yeah. So, I mean, they need help like what you're doing for these schools. And to backtrack, Waynesburg, they offered a kid from Lexington over at Bryan Station. His name is Rashad Faulkner. He got an offer from them in October. He's a 5'11" point guard, very hitty, great decision maker. You can't speed him up. Great, ball. He doesn't get sped up, doesn't turn the ball over, and But those coaches need that help to build their program, because at the end of the day they can't do that also. And you were talking about events, and we spoke about that Tuesday night. We spoke about what our idea of a successful camp is compared to maybe the media's idea of a successful camp. And before we go into that, you're having a unsigned showcase camp in June. Tell us about that, and then I want you to tell everyone the idea of a successful camp, how you run your camps, and why it is successful.
So we're going to roll out an unsigned senior event June 7th. It'll be in Charleston, West Virginia. Obviously we haven't done this before. We're going to give this a try. I don't even know if this is something that's greatly needed in West Virginia, but we're going to give it a try. I'm never afraid to fail on some of this stuff. So, for us financially, whatever, it's no risk. It's just station and all that. But we're going to give it a try. I hope I've been telling some kids, hopefully you're already signed and you don't have to come. But the opportunity is going to be there, if you need it. So we're going to do, it'll be an all-day deal, but it'll be girls. The girls portion of it will be in the morning. The boys portion of it will be in the afternoon. And, the Division III JUCO prep schools, NAIA, NCC, or what is it, NCCSA, I can't remember what that organization is.
I think it's NCSA. Yeah.
The other organization that overlooks small colleges, and I can't think of what the numbers are. But anyway, those schools will all be permitted to be there. It's a quiet period when it's a quiet period for Division I, Division II. But they have different rules than everybody else. So, I've already got a confirmation from an NAIA school that they'll be there. We're actually I had the D3 school that confirmed that they would have a coach there. So, it'll be a good opportunity for prep schools to fill out their rosters. For the post grad programs to fill out their rosters. So, we may be the BlueChips post grad team may be filling their last few roster spots from that event. And there's some other maybe D3 schools and AIA schools maybe filling at their JV and developmental rosters, from that event. We'll try to get some schools, the U Pikes and the Kentucky Christians and some of those there that we know have developmental rosters, and there may be some kids that can pick up an offer or an opportunity there with some of them. I think Fort Union may be there. So anyway, there's we're going to give it a try. Hoping for 30 to 40 kids to be there, and we'll take them from any state. They don't have to be from West Virginia. They can be from Kentucky, Virginia, wherever. Hopefully have a good solid showing there. And I'd love for that to be a year-to-year event. So we'll see what the market bears as far as the number of kids, and we'll go from there. If it's something that doesn't fly, then we won't do it again. But we want to try it once. Because it's kind of like one of those things. If it's needed in West Virginia, then we want to do it. If it's not needed, then so be it. So we're going to give that a try. So that's June 7th, and again, that's for 2025s. So roll into, you're talking about, how we do our camps, how we do our events.
We were talking about our idea of a successful camp compared to other camps. I mean, you don't have to give exact details, but like what we spoke about, what are camps and events really for? And I just want you to elaborate on that.
Well, I know, remembering back to our conversation, and I remember the point I drove home was the coaches have to be there, number one. And it has to be in a format and in a design that fits them. There's just no other way around it. Because if the college coaches don't enjoy the event, if they don't feel like it's an efficient, way for them to identify players, if they don't feel like it's a good use of their time, they're not going to come.
They're not going to come back.
Anybody can get a bunch of coaches in the gym once. I don't want them there once. I want them. We had 8 Division III coaches last year. I want 20 of them there this year. I want 20 coaches there this year. That's my goal. 20 coaches, NAIA, Division III, JUCO, whatever. I want those all there. That's my goal. I feel like the way we did things last year with our August event, that it was very efficient. It was very well ran, and the coaches got a lot of traction out of it. We had a kid that was offered on the spot, before he left the facility. All the coaches there had several conversations with several different kids once they were done on the court, and the day was over. I lost track, but I think at one time there was about 12 offers that had come from, that had stemmed from from that event, not just the coaches there, but from evaluation and, from me that, and I know I said I don't evaluate, but where I could, a lot of kids that I could see for the first time.
Yeah, just to lay eyes on them in the gym instead of film. Against like you spoke about the competition level, and you don't have to go into how you do that, but that really matters because I know in Kentucky it's maybe like this in West Virginia. You could have a kid. I think I told you about a kid 20 and 15, something like that. But I got to see him in a gym against somebody with the same size, and it didn't produce that. So the value of those camps, you're there, coaches are there, but the players should be there for the meat and potatoes. The side stuff, that's cool and all, but like you said, the goal is, I don't know what you said, 12 scholarships or be able to lay eyes on the kids. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, and just exactly what you said, we were able to do. And I explained to these coaches like these are ones on ones. These are all staters versus all staters. These are starters versus these. We're not mixing these, and these kids they were all invited. I invited them personally, invited them, and divided them up into teams. So when we when we went to the 5-on-5, it was on, and everybody got guarded hard. The post players had, likable, like size to go against, like size and ability guys to go against. So everybody got a good look, with good competition, and that's in the end, that's what it's all about. And if you can create an event like that, the coaches are going to find value in it, and I've just heard so much feedback about the showcase stuff, the showcase stuff, and the 4 and the 5 hour showcases, and coaches just don't want to. They just don't want to do it anymore. So it was time to do something different. Time to come up with a different idea. And so that's what that whole thing stemmed from. And just to kind of clue everybody in, so what we did was they were 5-on-5 runs, not open runs, but just 5-on-5 runs, controlled runs, I guess you could say. Where I invited everybody, and then I split up myself into teams because I knew the talent level of every kid because I invited them myself. So I was able to make the teams perfectly even, and everybody that coached they weren't dads, they weren't they were guys that were all former college players, and they had they had the expectation of what a college player looks like, and try to do things that coach them in a way that translated to to college type college level things that they need to be doing on the floor. So and again, it was nothing but great feedback from coaches when we were done, and we just really cut the fluff and made it really, really efficient, where coaches could get in and out in a couple hours, get a good look at who they needed. We had a spreadsheet that had everybody's name, jersey number, height, weight, high school, the whole thing, where they could watch the game, correlate with who they wanted to see, and just made it as easy as possible for them. So I mean that's what it's all about. If you don't have that element that the coaches are getting value out of it, then you really don't have an event. You just got a bunch of kids in the gym, and yeah, you might make some money, but it's not. I told you, I think I walked away with $350. When that event was over, and I bought dinner for 2 of my coaches afterwards.
But the value of those 12 offers is way more than putting a few $1,000s in your pocket.
Right.
I mean, it's not. It's anybody could make $1 real quick, but in our business, that's going to get exposed sooner or later, right? So if your event's producing results, then who's going to want to come? Like, I don't understand that aspect of these showcases.
Right. And the value isn't so much, that I'll say,
hey,
there's 12 offers that come from this, or whatever it was. I don't know what it ended up being. But the value is there were
Coaches
12
there.
offers from coaches that were there, and so then that that signifies to me that they saw value in it, and so I know those guys will come back.
Yeah.
They'll come back, and there'll be another 5 or 6 coaches that'll come come as well, and that's just how it builds. So that part of it, has to have that value to the coaches, or you just don't have an event if it doesn't. We're kidding ourselves if we're doing events where coaches aren't getting getting some value out of it. So anyway, so I thought if we're what do we have, 60 kids, and about a quarter of them, getting an offer out of that 60, which is probably about where it is now. I mean, we were doing pretty really. If you break it down, almost half of. Well, I'll take that back. Let's break it down even farther, because this was just 2025s. I think we had probably, I think we had 18 2025s there. So we would have had almost, we would have had 2/3 of them with an offer, and this was probably by January 1st. That had offer that stemmed from that event. And I say come from that event, it was coaches that were at event that offered a kid at that event. I know those coaches probably didn't get a chance to see that kid anywhere after that. So I'm sure that's what it stemmed from is putting those kids on their watch list. And then checking up on them, at the beginning of the school season and extending an offer if they didn't do that even beforehand. So, anyway, so that's a pretty good ratio. Like I said, we had about 18 2025s, and I think 12 or 13 2026s that went along with them. We had them in one group of 30, 31, 32, whatever it was, into 5 teams. And so pretty good ratio there of those 2025s. But like I said, and that sounds like a low number, but that's who I invited. Those were the kids that I invited that I knew. Number one, I knew they were committed to wanting to play somewhere. Number two, I knew that they, would be gracious enough to, to entertain offers from Division III schools. And number three, guys that I know would show up and, absolutely compete hard for 2 hours. So
because at the end of the day, your company or yourself, your reputation's on the line. So let's just say if those kids, you invited those D1 kids and you have D3 coaches there, D3 coaches, and, coaches, they don't have time to go, and if it's not at their level, then they're not going to be interested. So
and we had kids that I just wasn't going to invite because it was going to be a waste of their time, and they may have even wanted to come just to work out. But again, I'm not going to invite. I'm going to waste their time. I'm not going to take their $100. Just for the sake of having them there and getting their $100, because it wasn't going to do any of the coaches there any good. It wasn't going to do that kid any good to be there. So those kids have their own events that they need to go to, and the division. A lot of the Division III coaches told me that they felt. They really enjoyed having that event to themselves, where there wasn't
competition.
Well, I mean, not so much competition, because they're really in competition. These guys are in competition with themselves. But they didn't feel threatened by Division II coaches being there. And then when those players walk off the floor. If you're a 17-year-old kid and there's Division II coaches standing there, Division III coaches, who are you going to go to? They know who's who, but so they could really get down in the weeds and really talk to these guys in depth afterwards without, Division II coach or, maybe, a lower level Division I coach kind of lurking over their shoulder, which evidently, some of these guys had experience, and kind of plucking some of these recruits out of their hands. Which I understand that stuff's all, that's all fair. That's just part of the game. But, I think they appreciated not having that kind of pressure there, just kind of having their own, quote unquote small school event for, small college, small, JUCO, that type of stuff. And, I like having it that way. There's enough live events and things like that for Division I guys and Division II guys that I don't feel that I need to do that. I would love to, but finding the time and the facility to do that that's a whole different story. But anyway,
let's be real. Like, I don't know the player makeup of Kentucky, but we kind of hit on this Tuesday night here in Kentucky. 9 out of 10 kids are not going to play Division I basketball. So,
right.
What good would it do anyway? I mean, is it that way in West Virginia as well? I'm sure it is. It's a smaller state, smaller population. It just the numbers don't lie.
Yeah. I say all the time, we're in every sport, not just basketball. We're a Division III, NAIA, JUCO, what have you. We're a factory for those schools. I mean, and we should embrace that. We produce a lot of D2 kids too, but we need to embrace the fact that we produce all these kids. I mean, there's 70 to 75 kids in this 2025 class in West Virginia that are plenty good enough to be on a college roster somewhere at some level. That's by far the most since I've been doing this. 2023 in particular, there was 40 kids. That was it. I mean, it was 40, and they maxed it out, and I think there was 44 kids that actually signed to go play somewhere, and that was about the maximum amount of kids that really had that kind of ability. This year's 2025 list is almost twice that, and not all those kids aren't going to go play somewhere, but that just tells you the depth of what's there available. It's just a matter of how many kids actually want to go do it, but it's there, and the overwhelming majority, other than let's see, the top 5-6 kids in this class could be the Division I kids, maybe not right away, but if they prep. Caleb Thomas from Spring Mills, he could be a Division I kid if he takes a prep year. That's what I'm saying. You're only talking about 4 or 5 kids a year that have that Division I level.
You know what really stood out to me there, though? You went from 45 to 75, right, in 2 years?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you're like me. This isn't all about ourselves. You helped shape 35, 40 kids' future that may not have got it. They could get to go to school, get an education, learn structure. There's more to it than basketball. So you're just like me. We're just not about putting kids in D1 or here or there, but there's 40 extra kids that you got to help have a better future through playing basketball. Even though it's D3, it doesn't matter. That's how I see it. I mean,
right.
I don't think everybody does, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to help them all.
Yes.
And I try, just like you do. It's getting bigger and bigger and more robust, every week, trying to keep up with tweets and DMs and the follows and things. So I guess in that regard, we're our own worst enemy as far as getting followers and that type of thing. But it's still all good stuff, and it's still going to grow the sport, as far as in West Virginia anyway. And I think we're seeing that kind of growth. But Yeah. So
let's talk about what we talked about Tuesday night, where kids really get recruited at, and some misconceptions. AAU basketball. I want you to talk about what you spoke about Tuesday night about, what program you choose, who coaches the program, and what that coach told you about the certain player that played for a high level program.
Well, I mean, everybody has a different fit and a different perspective of where they need to be, but you've got to be really conscious about what circuit you belong on. And I think we've got way out of hand worrying about shoe circuits, this circuit, that circuit, whatever. We're just like circuit crazy.
Well,
I'm tired of hearing the word.
The shoes numbers, the shoe circuits. Don't get me wrong. You can look at the McDonald's All-American game, and yes, most of those players from shoe circuits. But like we were talking about, that's the top kids. We work with a lot of kids that's not going to that level. So
Right.
just because you play on a high-level circuit doesn't mean you're going to play for a high-level college team. And
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but talk about, the dynamics of the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, and the expectation of when teams go on those circuits, at least the top three circuits, which I would say, obviously Nike, EYBL, the 3SSB, and I don't know, Puma. I don't know if Puma or Under Armour would be next, but the expectation of those top flight teams in that is to be stocked with D1, level kids. And if the program isn't, they're not going to be on there very long. They're going to get kicked off. And that happens. That's a real thing because there's a waiting list of teams that are ready to go on there and take their place. So if you're not a Division One, a legit Division One kid, that's not where you belong. Number one, and you're probably wasting your time. And I can give examples of it, but I won't do that. But that's a real thing. Like you gotta be where you can get recruited. And I'll use two great examples, and I know this from experience. If you take, let's see, the majority of kids in, let's just say Kentucky and West Virginia, you have two great independent circuits, non-shoe circuits, in Hoop Group, the HGSL, the Hoop Group Showcase League, and the Big Shots, circuit. The beauty of those two circuits are when coaches come, when there's an event and they have Hoop Group Showcase League games, there's coaches from all levels that come there because there's kids from all levels playing. There's Division I kids, there's Division II kids, there's Division III kids, there's JUCO kids that are ready to go to JUCO. There's, so you have all kids. So you don't have to have you can place, any kid can play for a team that goes that certain, and you're going to get a look. If you're legit, you're going to get a look because there's coaches there from all levels. And I mean, that's the beauty of those types of circuits. And those fit most West Virginia teams, if not all, for the most part, to be on one of those. I don't know anything about the Made Hoops deal. I don't know. I just don't know enough about that to really say anything about it. We have a team, in West Virginia here that, that's on the Puma circuit. They're entering their second year. So they've had to beef up their roster quite a bit to compete there, and they've looks like they've done that from the rosters I've seen. So that'll be interesting to see how they fare the rest of this year. But for the most part, the kids in West Virginia, they're just not shoe circuit kids, and that's not going to change anytime soon. That's just the way it is. So parents have to be really, really informed and heady about that, and not just get inundated with playing at the highest level. Playing at the highest level is fine, but it doesn't. It may not play to your best interest as far as recruiting goes.
Because at the end of the day, AAU costs money, travel, whatever. So you want to be able to get your money to go the farthest with anything in life. So, like you said,
I mean,
on the
you can be a kid.
Yeah,
you can be a kid offers has D2 offers, mid-level D2 offers in Kentucky or West Virginia or whatever, and you can get on a shoe circuit and play in Atlanta or Omaha, Nebraska or Denver, Colorado, and nobody's going to care because there's probably 1,000 kids like you there that live a lot closer to wherever their campus is. And that's just the reality of it. Why would they take a chance on a kid that lives 1,000 miles away when there's
and they
1,000 kids?
They can see that kid a whole lot more too. They can go see the high school games. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Exactly, because there's D2s, even though they're in that portal, they're doing that. When they recruit high school kids, they're still recruiting somewhat regionally, and so. I mean, that's just the way it is. So, the other thing I see that bothers me that I know, is, and I'm not saying this is terrible. I'm not saying this is, but if you can keep away from, and I'm speaking to, the AAU programs themselves, you can keep away from dads coaching their kids. It's an absolute
so watered down. Oh no, my guest has left. We were talking about AAU basketball and with the dads coaching. I think I got him right back. I hope so. I think I got you right back. You kicked off, but Scott, I got you back, and I want to hit on the dad ball that we were talking about tonight.
Yeah, and I recall, I think I told you Tuesday night, an instance that happened at Myrtle Beach a year or so ago, and when we were down there for a live event, and and it was a dad coach team. I knew who it was. The college coach knew who it was, and he watched it for 90. He watched 90 seconds of the game and got up and left. And I was so disheartened about that. But. It is what it is, and I understand, that coach is, thinking, but, he just got up and left and never said a word. After asking me to go down and watch that game with him, but he just saw, what he didn't want to see, and, he just moved on, and it's just simple as that. And like I said, when that stigma that follows that program, around, when it does, and I'm not saying that every dad coach program, every dad coach team out there is terrible. The Ellis brothers' dad coaches them in their games, but most kids aren't Ellis brothers' level of talent either. But that's just some. I just have this is just me personally. I just have a real problem with high school kids getting coached by their dad. I just think it's a terrible idea. Now, if they're coaching the high school team, if they're coaching your school team and that's where you go to school, that's a different story. But when you have a choice, and I think it takes away in most cases. I think it takes away developmentally, not because that coach maybe is nicer to their kid or whatever, but I just think it's better to get coached by somebody else. I just think I think in most cases the kids are more engaged, and it takes any of those stigmas or doubts from other parents, from college coaches or whatever. And in a state that struggles to get kids looked at, we need every advantage we can get. And but that's just, and that's some of my opinion. but that's also feedback from, again, I thrive on feedback from college coaches, and that's just one of the things that they just, is it a deal breaker in every case? No.
I mean,
But
I get the angle of these coaches that, or dad coaches, whatever. Their angle is they're thinking they're going to get their kid the best opportunity to play at the next level. But we're not saying that everyone is this way. But at the end of the day, they could wind up hurting their kid more than helping their kid. Right?
Yeah. And I think I think that's the case in more times than not. I just, either it's developmentally or or that's the optics, with college coaches is it's, dad coaching. I think more times than not, it turns into a negative. And the dad might be doing absolutely nothing wrong.
But
But it's
like the
just,
stigmas.
it's just what's there. But anyway, there's a lot of that in any tournament you go to, and it is what it is. But if I'm giving parents advice, that's my advice: is don't have don't go anywhere. Where dad, where there's dads coaching. I mean, get your kid coached by. I don't know why some of these AU programs don't hire, fifth-year seniors that are at, local colleges to come in and pay them and coach.
You know why? I think we know why, but we don't have to say why. But at the end of the day, yeah.
I mean, it'd be so easy, and you've got somebody that, number one, has a direct link to a college. Number two, you have somebody that has been in a college program and knows what kind of things to teach that translate to college. I can't see anything but positives for it, and huge positives at that. And now with kids, with the NIL and all that stuff out there, you can pay these kids with no repercussions. They can come and earn it, and and do some real developmental type of things. They can come and put on, do training, with these guys, on the side. They can, there's huge opportunity there, and I just, some of these, some of these teams that are located, so close to universities where there's players and where there's, college teams at. I just think it would be so easy to do that. Maybe it's not as easy as I think, but man, I think it would be. I know it happens, and I just think it would be. It'd be a great idea, especially in a state like West Virginia that, is really. We have a hard time finding quality coaches for high school programs, let alone, anything else. So, so it's a struggle, year in, year out, week in, week out to have coach, kids coached at a high level. But, it is what it is. Part of that's just me on my soapbox, but I know that's real stuff. And, that would be my, primary fix for it. So.
But yeah, like Tuesday night, I really think this turned out to be a great podcast. We hit on some great topics, recruiting, how to be more effective, efficiently to target, AAU, the transfer portal, like you said, your events, which hopefully we can get a few together, because I at the end of the day, we understand what the events are for, and
right.
There's great people in this business. And with every other business, it is what it is. I'm not saying it's bad or it's good, but
right.
Yeah, I really think that I really wanted to have you on the podcast because I think this is valuable information. Some of it could be just our opinion, but some of it's facts that we get feedback from coaches, and I think a lot of parents and players don't have this information. Maybe it's readily available, like you said. Some just don't want to hear it. But, the object of the podcast was to be able to get this information out there and hopefully affect some kids' recruitment, to get to the fullest out of their recruitment instead of time, money. And at the end of the day,
Right.
they're kids, and if they don't get the desired outcome of their hard work, what can happen the rest of their life. So it's more about basketball. It's confidence and work ethic and things like that. So I love what you're doing over there at Blue Chips, and what you're doing for the West Virginia kids. I think it's great. Um, and
Likewise, and it's I've got to see the stuff that you've done for so many kids, and I know you're just kind of getting back in the swing of things, and but I think you have that entire state's attention, and there's going to be some kids that's really going to benefit from your presence, online and eventually with events and things like that. So I'm glad we connected, and we'll do some, like I said the other night, we'll eventually get some events or something done together, sooner or later, whether it be this year or next or sometime, but we'll make it happen. I just think there's too much mutual interest to not let it happen. So
yeah, and I know we reached out, but I have to talk about who kind of really connected us was another great guy, in recruiting, Kevin Moses. Like, great human being, knows what he's doing, loves the kids, loves what he's actually doing, passionate about it, and like I said, he's a great human being. So, I'm really excited because, I got to meet you through him, and he's a great person, and if you're connected with him, then yes, I definitely want to work with you. So I just wanted to mention him there and what he does, what he actually does with the kids. I know he does a lot of the promotion and exposure, but that is needed at the end of the day.
Kevin loves what he does, and Kevin loves what he does, and he does what he loves. And we talked about that Tuesday. And I admire him for that. He just does what he wants to do when he wants to do it, and with who he wants to do it with. And he's doing it his way, and I greatly admire that. And there has been kids that's absolutely benefited from his. He's done a good job of finding some hidden gems, and really kind of getting the exposure to them in different states, in West Virginia, in Kentucky, in Tennessee, and probably other states.
He's all over the U.S. Yeah.
And just because he's the first person that maybe wrote an article about him, or the first person that really tweeted anything about him, and he's connected to so many people in so many places. That kind of stuff makes its rounds, and eventually it catches somewhere. Somebody sees it at the right time in the right place, and they take advantage of what they see, and it usually happens really fast. So I consider Kevin a good friend, and we're always it's always a handshake and a hug every time we see each other, and I appreciate everything he's done. He's kind of one of the people that's kind of paved the way for people to jump in and do things like you and I do, and he's what a great guy, and he's continuing his his quest to get exposure for every kid he possibly can, and he's done a well of a job so far, and he's not letting up anytime soon.
Yeah, and before we hop off here, I'm getting ready to mail out your sweet. I don't know if you can see this. I'm in the dark, kind of, but your shirt. I don't know. I get great feedback off those, and I don't know if you have your own, but if you do, like, I'd love to have one of yours. But yeah, at the end of the day, I love what you do, and I would definitely be proud to represent, Blue Chips around this area, wherever I go.
Yep, absolutely. You'll have one. You'll have one soon. I've got to order another batch here in the next week or so of shirts and send out. I don't sell very many of them. I give most of them away, and it's just for a promotional tool so far.
Great marketing tool. It's a great marketing tool for sure.
It It is, and kids, you've got a nice design, nice clean design there, and I can see where kids really like that and would support that anywhere. So, but it's I'll make sure you get and I do my next round of shirts. Make sure you get a couple of the different logos, and I'll send out to you. So, but yeah. We better wrap this up because my phone's on it.
We got too much to do, right? I'm already behind.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, it's been a great talk. Like I said, we hit on most of the points we hit on Tuesday night, and just to be able to get the information out there, I really think we had a great podcast, and I enjoy talking to you about everything that we do and what we try to do, and